This conference will now be recorded.
Yes, thank you so much, Laura. We're so glad to have you with us, and we're ready for you to take it away.
Great. Well, I am so pleased to be with you all today, and it's my pleasure to talk to you about an initiative that we started back in 2017 called Dementia Inclusive Cincinnati. And you all have been so nice to invite me to 2 sessions. So today is just where I'm going to share with you kind of where this idea came from, what we've been able to accomplish in a few short years, and then give you an indication of what we're going to cover the next time. It'll be of interest. So I'd just like to start with, who we are, because I think it provides context as to where this initiative is coming from. So Episcopal Retirement Services is an aging services network located in Cincinnati, Ohio, but we have, we serve the broader community in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. And on an annual basis, we touch the lives personally of over 4,800 elders. And we do that with a variety of programs. First, we're known somewhat in Cincinnati for our retirement communities. We have 2 CCRCs in Cincinnati, and most recently, we added a continuing care retirement community to our family, Episcopal Church Home in Louisville, Kentucky. We also, I think some of the folks in the audience maybe know our staff and know us for our affordable living initiative or affordable living work. And I'm really proud to say that ERS has 30 campuses in 3 states serving elders. It's actually our largest program that touches the lives of elders. So we're very, very proud of that initiative that Kathy Eisenland has led for several years. And then lastly, ERS has a variety of outreach programs. We have Meals on Wheels, Parish Health Ministry, and Living Well Senior Solutions. So I just give that as an umbrella to we touch the lives of many people, but when it comes to dementia, we always say that dementia doesn't discriminate in terms of our different product lines that we offer the community. It touches each and every one of our product lines. So that's a little bit of background about ERS. Next, I'd like to share with you my guy, Bill. So my guy, Bill Dotson, it was my surrogate dad, and everybody has their story. I think when you talk about dementia, I don't know about you, but my mind goes immediately to the people that I loved and cared for that had this terrible disease or have this terrible disease. So Bill was, like I said, my surrogate dad. My dad died when I was very, very young, and Bill came in my life and really was that person that was my father figure for years. We worked together, and when he retired from ERS, he actually got into some health issues, one of which was having Alzheimer's and dementia. And he found himself in the community with not any family except for that surrogate family that of the Lambs, my family. And what Bill taught me, and you're going to hear it's really inspired us, is 2 things. Number one, Bill came to live with us at Marjorie P. Lee. And Marjorie P. Lee is a wonderful community. We do great work. We provide wonderful care. We're recognized as, one of the top retirement communities in our area. But I have to tell you, and many of you on the phone know this, it's different when you're a family member. When you're not, a social worker or an accountant or, a life enrichment person, but if you, or a housing manager, but if you're the person that loved one calls daughter or son or aunt or uncle, whatever, it changes the dynamic. And I learned so much from Bill because he was trying to navigate Marjorie P. Lee with a cognitive impairment. So the story that I often tell is how and I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but how knowing better, tried to train Bill, tried to give him cheat sheets, tried to write down things for him, even though I knew where he was in the disease process and that no amount of cueing or reminders or cheat sheets would help him. And at Marjorie P. Lee, at the time that he lived there, he lived on the 5th floor, and the dining room, of course, was on the 1st floor. And you can imagine that there were 17 decision points for him to get from his apartment door down to the dining room. And so I tried to map those out. I would write a little post-it. He always had an index card in his pocket. And so I would write down, right at the green chair and left at the elevator and press 5 and all this nonsense that he struggled with and I struggled with. And it was an going experience to go through that, because we know this, no amount of training, depending on where the brain is going to make them remember how to make a right-hand turn or, to navigate an environment. So that was the first thing he taught me. The second thing he taught me in a very humbling way is if we, and those of us that have dedicated our lives to serving older adults, and specifically those that have cognitive loss, if we're struggling with all that great training that Leading Age gives us year after year, we're struggling, how do we think our neighbors or the folks that we go to church with or the people in the grocery store, how in the heck do we think they're dealing with this? And he taught me that because he has a kind of a dementia where he would have some outbursts every now and again. And so I remember being in a restaurant with him and just being embarrassed to my core. And I feel embarrassed to share that with you, but it's a true story that I, in that moment, thought to myself, well, we're not going to be going out to restaurants anymore. And that was because of me and how the waitress's look made me feel, and how the commotion that we caused made me feel. And like I said, I'm not proud of that, but I've turned that emotion into what can we do? How can we help serve people better? I love pictures of Bill, so that's why I put them in there. The next slide just kind of tells you what the next step was. So like I said, when Bill passed away, our team got together at Marjorie Lee and said, we've learned a lot by having someone in our building as our loved one. And Bill was loved by, the leadership team at Marjorie P. Lee. And so we used that moment to say, what could we do differently? 17 decision points to a dining room if you have cognitive loss is just too many, right? And the best practice, as we all know, is to have elders come out of their space that have cognitive loss and see something, hear something, or smell something that pulls them in. And we did not have that in some of our areas at Marjorie P. Lee. So we went on a journey based on what we learned from Bill. And I like to say we got our house in order. We made sure that our communities are much more inclusive for those that have cognitive loss or memory support needs. We also reached out to everyone that would help us. We're one of the first, actually the second organization across the country that adopted SIDO with Eliza Jennings' help. We are a positive approach to care and Java music. We incorporated all that, again, in an effort to kind of get our house in order and make sure that we were providing what we needed to, the best in class dementia support, memory support to our elders. We had other initiatives. We invited the brightest minds and the best speakers to our organization in our parish health ministry conference, which we hold every year. Again, that was our kind of the first attempt to kind of, okay, now we feel like we're doing a better job internally. What can we do to share our learnings with the broader community? And then a woman named Megan Bradford came into my office one day, and this was after Bill had passed. It was after we had started on our journey. And Megan at the time was an administrator of training. She's now our director of strategic initiatives. And she is a very, very wise woman. And she, at the time, she was AIT and also working as a move-in coordinator. And she came in my office and she was in tears, and she had just interacted with a family member, a daughter that was moving her mom into Marjorie P. Lee. And Megan said these words to me. She said, "Lara, if I had talked to any of our residents the way that daughter just talked to her mother, I would be fired." And she followed up. She wasn't casting blame at all. What she said is, you have to know better to do better. You have to know better to do better. And that brought up in my mind what I said earlier, that if we think it's tough, how in the heck do we expect other people to be able to do this? And Megan reminded me of that thought that I had a few years before, and we can do better. We can do better. So as a leading age, not-for-profit organization, that conversation with Megan Bradford really set ERS on a journey to say, it's one thing to get your house in order, but we have a social and a moral obligation as a leading age member to do more. And I thank Megan for speaking clearly into my life and saying, it's not good enough just to get your house in order. You got to help others along the way. So thank you, Megan. So the need is overwhelming. You've heard the statistics. It's a $1 million or a million people problem. 5.7 million folks with Alzheimer's or related dementia. That increases 500,000 people each and every year. By the year 2050, it's estimated by some folks that this is going to be a $16 million issue for our country. And then you think about it where I sit, you think about our industry, and to date, our industry has largely, not exclusively, but largely used housing and skilled nursing as a way to help folks care for people. And that's not a criticism at all. That's just a realization that I had. So I looked up how many skilled nursing beds there were in our country at the time. And it doesn't take a genius to see the math there. There aren't enough nursing beds or housing opportunities for people that have cognitive loss. Not to mention the fact that not everyone can afford a private pay assisted living accommodation. And then you think about the impact that that's going to have on our country if those folks that can't afford it will go into nursing homes and need Medicare level state funded assistance. So that is overwhelming. It's overwhelming for an individual. It's overwhelming for an organization. It can be overwhelming for a community. And certainly, if we don't pay attention to this trend, it will be overwhelming for our healthcare system in our country. So if I'm having difficulty, if I'm having trouble, we can't do it alone. And I recognize that. That's something that's core to ERS, is that we don't pretend to know it all. We love partnerships. We love partnerships in our affordable living space. We love partnerships in our retirement communities. We love being a member of Leading Age Ohio and the National Association, because we don't have to do it alone. We don't have to do it alone. So reminding ourselves of that key principle and the fact that amazing people that have wonderful resources struggle. And when we started this initiative, Sandra Day O'Connor resigned because although she was able to continue to work while her husband had cognitive loss, when that issue affected her, she knew she needed to step away. And I don't know why, but that just pained me beyond belief that, gosh, how do we expect everyone to deal with this? So we reached out to some trusted folks, specifically here in Cincinnati. We reached out to the Alzheimer's Association, our local chapter. We reached out to the city of Cincinnati. And then because we feel like everything we should do, serving our elders should be rooted in science and in medicine and best practices, we reached out to the University of Cincinnati. And really, our entities really became the driving force with this initiative. So we asked ourselves, what if we could ensure an early diagnosis? What if we could shape our communities around people with dementia and their caregivers? What if we could take that stigma away that I felt being at a restaurant when Bill was using all kinds of four-letter words that day? What if transportation wasn't an issue? What if businesses and services could learn to respond instead of react to people with dementia? What if our activities in our communities could be geared for and inclusive of people with dementia? What if the physical environment were different in our communities? What if we had befrienders that really leaned in and helped folks to ultimately empower people with dementia to have high aspirations, confidence, and know that they can contribute? One of the members of my early steering team said it so well. She said, what if Cincinnati became known as the place that you wanted to live if you or your loved one was diagnosed with Alzheimer's? So we casted a bold vision. We said, okay, it is overwhelming. It is a challenge, but we're the organization. We're going to get this started. We're not going to just wallow in the fact that it is overwhelming. We're going to do something. Little change. That's what we're going to be about. And our little change wasn't all that little. We want to make Cincinnati the most dementia inclusive city in our country by the year 2025. And we are on our way. We're actually more than 3 years into this journey. So right away, we created an official dementia inclusive initiative. It was backed by our Alzheimer's Association local chapter. And it was an extension at the beginning of Dementia Friendly America. We used their principles to get us started. So what is it? What is it? So when we decided that we were all in and we were going to do something, we invited the city of Cincinnati, a really important partner, and a neighborhood group, Kennedy Heights. You see their logo up there. And the reason for that is we felt that we needed to do a two-pronged approach. We really wanted to find out at a grassroots level what communities needed, what neighborhoods needed. But then we also knew that we have 52 neighborhoods in Cincinnati, and that might take a long time to work through the neighborhood approach. But so we also wanted to do something on a citywide initiative. And it wasn't an or, it was a yes and. We absolutely wanted to do both. So we chose Kennedy Heights as our pilot neighborhood. And we did that because Kennedy Heights was the only one of those 52 neighborhoods in Cincinnati that in their neighborhood charter, in their purpose statement, they used these words that I think will resonate with the audience today. They were the only neighborhood that said that they wanted their elders to age in community. Wow. A lot of neighborhoods, when elders get too complicated or sticky, as I call it, they help elders leave their neighborhoods, not Kennedy Heights. Kennedy Heights wants to be inclusive and wants their elders to stay in their neighborhood. Isn't that cool? On the citywide example, we thought we'd start with fire and police because being in a retirement community, we can see some of the opportunities working with fire and police. And I just so desperately wanted to train fire and police and show them a different way to interact with our residents. The fire and the police were not interested. And so that was an important part of our journey. We had to figure out that there has to be a willingness to take this on. And so we decided that we were going to let the fire and city go, and we were going to focus on other business segments, work on our pilot and demonstrate to the fire and city or fire and police that they really needed this training. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple initiatives, but the citywide approach looked at services that were provided throughout the city, whether that be at our libraries, our grocery stores, our banks, our restaurants, our churches. So the first, let me talk about Kennedy Heights. So Kennedy Heights, we've had a lot of great success there. And like I said, they've been our pilot to learn at a very grassroots level what people day to day living in the community are struggling with. And, this isn't rocket science. You all could probably predict what they're struggling with. They struggle with the rubs. They struggle with being able to go to restaurants, to go to the grocery store independently, to go to the bank and be in a safe environment. So Kennedy Heights initiative has really been very interesting. So based on several focus groups of this neighborhood, we accomplished two things that I want to share with you. The first thing is that we have worked with Kennedy Heights Community Council and partnered with them on a grant, and now they have a part-time social worker at one of their businesses in Kennedy Heights called the Caring Place. And specifically that grant is to help people that live in 5 neighboring locations, 5 neighborhoods, to provide a social worker to anyone that lives in those zip codes as their cognition changes and they need community-based services. Wow. The other thing that came out from the focus groups is, again, these are the groups that wanted to help their elders age in community, age in place. And so they identified that they really needed affordable housing for seniors in their neighborhood. And so they have been working with our affordable living development team. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but they're really eagerly looking for a site that may be competitive, that we can receive a tax credit award so that we can help them develop a affordable living community in their neighborhood. On the city side, we actually got started at the library. So about the same time as we were exploring our community-wide initiative, an individual at the library had read an article about the library system in Boston, Massachusetts, that created memory cafes. And memory cafes, the term is a little confusing. It's not like a restaurant. It's not a literal cafe. It's more the concept of coming to have socialization and a cup of coffee and some camaraderie. So we've created memory cafes in our city with the local library system, which is actually a county-wide system. Ironically, I always like to give credit for this because I think in these kind of initiatives, you have to use all your resources. So it just happens that when the library system asked for a volunteer to get started within this system, there was one individual that raised her hand, and it was my little sister. So Michelle Elliott is our champion at the library, and she has helped not only started at her branch, but now we have 4 different branches that use the Memory Cafe with our help and support, as well as from the Alzheimer's Association, and they're just doing amazing work. And then we also set our sights on other rubs, the grocery stores, the banks, the restaurants. So we launched our Memory Cafe in June of 2018, and it's really one of the kind programs because it's not a focus group, it's not a support group, but what it is an outing, a gathering where not only the person with dementia, but also their care partner interact together. A lot of times it's one or the other, isn't it? The Memory Cafe, the critical success factor is that it has to be an activity or something that they can enjoy together. And why is that? Well, the theory is that there's camaraderie and there is a feeling of I don't have to explain myself. So the activities are really those that both the caregiver and the person with cognitive loss can interact with together. So the library decided that they were going to make a statement that their goal was to create warm and welcoming interactions because they believe, based on our training, that they can create positive experiences and they feel like they can make a difference in their community. So what's my evidence of that? I want you to meet Pete. So Pete was one of the first people that attended a memory cafe. It's been a couple years ago now. And Pete was in his 80s and he and his wife attended. He had cognitive loss and his wife just loved the respite of a good book. And so when the library created a memory cafe, they ran to that. And just so happens that one of the sessions that I helped facilitate, I met Pete. And he was leaving and he shook my hand and he had this bright smile on his face and he said, I made a friend today. I made a friend today. And talking with his wife, Pete hadn't made friends for a very long time. And I would suggest to many of you that somebody in their 80s with cognitive loss really don't make friends anymore. But Pete made a friend because of our memory cafe. And I'm telling you, it just fired us up. We took it as evidence that we are on the right path. So some of the things that we are in process with or have worked on are relationships with the restaurant industry. That obviously came to a crashing halt with COVID-19, but we have provided training to one local restaurant, and it's been very, very successful. They're kind of known for the place locally in one neighborhood where elders gather. We have a relationship with one local bank. We're hoping to get that training off the ground once COVID is at a different normalcy. And then we're also going to be training one of our local grocery stores. They actually chose their pharmacy, which we thought was a really interesting place to start. So a lot of good work that's happening with our different business groups. I would like to say that one of the things that we've done very, very well is reach out to our churches. So last year we piloted with 5 churches because we really thought to ourselves, if we can't be inclusive in churches, then where can we be inclusive? So our parish health ministry staff did an amazing job partnering with our Dementia Inclusive strategy to reach out to 5 churches and create pilots. And again, this year, because of COVID, it's a little bit different than we had wanted it to, but we're still continuing to do work within the churches as well. So I believe in the bottom of my heart, with everyone's help, we can make Cincinnati a more dementia inclusive city. And my hope is that maybe I've sparked something in one or two of you that you might think, wow, maybe I could do this in my neck of the woods, my neighborhood, my city. So with that, I will leave you with my email address. The next part too, what I thought we covered is if you're interested, what we could do is really drill down into the training that we've created, how we've actually operationalized this, what is the training that we feel that the businesses need, and give you some insight as to how that's worked.
Laura, thank you so much for sharing that. Such an important initiative, and we're so thankful that you spent this time with us today. I do have a question here from one of our listeners. Would you be able to share more about the reason that firefighters and police were not interested?
Yes. The fire and police, we trained fire and police years ago on another initiative, the Elder Justice Act, when that came out, and we had a program where Yellow Dot, do you all remember that? The Yellow Dot program that helps first responders know if an elder has any health issues that they need to be aware of. And so in that experience, we found out the hard way that the police and the fire are just really struggling for resources, and they're asked to do so much with a very small training budget. So, frankly, maybe COVID will help this because, before COVID, we thought that every training program had to be live, didn't we? That was kind of the best practice. But we've learned through Zoom and, other WebExes that we can do things without being in person. But at the time, the city of Cincinnati had a lot of priorities, and the thought of, even though our training program is about an hour and 15 minutes, depending on the questions, that they could not afford to have their police and their fire off the street, so to speak, and provide that. So it was an issue of priority and funding.
Thanks for addressing that. I think that the way that our world is moving, much more will be offered remotely and in more distance and recorded formats. And so maybe there's opportunities to engage those folks more in the future.
Exactly. And that's how we're continuing to do our work with the churches. So, the church is shut down too, but our parish health ministry staff and our dementia inclusive staff have continued by hosting virtual meetings with churches.
That makes a lot of sense. Laura, another question here. How has COVID-19 impacted this work? So you noted that you've been able to do some things virtually. How else, if folks are wanting to start thinking about how they could incorporate some of this into their practice now, given our current limitations, what are you guys kind of doing and what would you recommend?
That is an excellent question. I would tell you that the library systems around the country are trying to reinvent themselves. So if I were starting this in another city, my first step would be to the library system, because they are, and I know this personally, I used to work at the library system in college, and I told you my sister is a head librarian at one of our branches, and it's universal. They have to provide community outreach because their funding is largely, it's a public institution, it's state funding, so they have to be accountable to metrics. And this is a wonderful program to demonstrate for them that community outreach, right? So that would be my first step, is if I were starting, I would really target the library, because like I said, Cincinnati is not the only model. You could point to Cincinnati and you could point to Boston to say, here are two models that we want to replicate and bring our resources as an aging services network to you. But we've just had to do things differently. We have continued, but it's different, it's hard to get attention of restaurants right now because restaurants are struggling with the governor's guidelines in every state are different and social distancing. So instead of letting that be a barrier, we just said, okay, we're going to put that on the shelf. We're going to focus on the business segments that make sense, whether that be the churches, whether that makes the libraries. The library hasn't skipped a beat. They transitioned their cafes to a memory cafe via Zoom, and they're having fun. Last time I heard, the last session was talking about weddings, and everyone on the Zoom call shared their screen and showed pictures of their wedding pictures and did a lot of reminiscing, and it was a heartwarming event, and it does two things. For the person with dementia, they can engage, and for the caregiver, they have something to look forward to in that camaraderie of people that understand where they're at that point. So don't let COVID stop you.
Thank you for that, Lara. We so appreciate your time today and look forward to having you back for part 2 of this talk. And thank you. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, Laura. We really appreciate it.
And I sincerely apologize for the technology glitch. So maybe I'll figure that out between now and then.
Oh, no problem at all. It's quite all right. I'm so glad that we got it figured out, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.